Welcome to another episode of Hard Work Beats Talent, where we aim to draw upon the insights of our inner circle in order to help our listeners make more informed decisions about their career and life through the wisdom and mistakes made by us and our guests throughout our journeys. I'm Nikita, and I'm joined as always by my good friend and co-host Alex. And on today's episode, we're joined by a very good friend, a member of our inner circle, Charlie. How are you doing, Charlie?
Good. Nice to meet you both in a podcast setting now.
Yeah, come on. Thanks for joining us. So to kick us off, do you want to give our listeners a little bit of a background summary about who you are, what you do, and where you come from?
Yeah, absolutely. Who am I? So, born in Wolverhampton, moved to the south when I was 18. So I left home at 18. What do? I do recruitment. I look after technical hiring, engineering hiring at a fintech called checkout.com. But I've been recruiting since 19, so literally straight out of school. Had a gap year. Was going to go to university, fell into recruitment, and I'm still here 12 years later.
Nice. And so with that, Alex, do you want to kick us off?
Absolutely. So recruitment, you hear a lot of kind of stories about the industry. Can you just bring it to life a bit? And
what sort of stories are you hearing, Alex?
I'm sure Charlie can
I know exactly.
Yeah. It'd be great if you could bring it to life a bit. And we know that you're a senior manager and you hold quite a senior position. So also breaking down how it's progressed and evolved as you started to where you are now.
I guess bring it back. When I first got into recruitment, and this is I'm not being disparaging to estate agents, but essentially it was on a par. It was like estate agency and recruitment were like the game, because it was sales. Back in when I first started, it was just sales, and that's where you always looked at recruitment. It was just, you're selling, but your commodity was a human, as crass as that sounds. But it's evolved. The industry's evolved so much, so I credit most of it. I've been quite fortunate to land in recruitment, but it's evolved into much more of a career now. So much that I've literally just hired someone in our team who, as part of their work experience at university, literally went into a recruitment agency. So I think now, especially as it starts to like as transforming from just hiring people to then merging with talent overall, and that's a really broad subject, a really broad area.
Could you explain a little bit what that means, what you just said, sort of hiring and then merging with talent?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you break it down with recruitment just, I guess as a definition, is quite simply the search of finding a candidate who would be fit for a particular role. That's the fundamental. How you go about that, that's when you start to get into the nitty gritty. But then when I talk about talent in general, I think it's like human capital. So you're looking at it like, you're kind of blurring the lines between what's about hiring someone, but then also developing that person so that they can be the best version of themselves as well.
Okay.
So then you kind of blur the lines between recruitment, L&D, operations in general, like how are we developing our staff. Then you start to go into like benefits, etc., and just total rewards, and then all of a sudden you just go into the broader remit of HR.
Okay.
And even nowadays, like the old days used to call HR human resources, a lot of stereotypes around what HR is. And now if you look at a lot of modern companies, they used to be a CHRO, be top of the tree, Chief Human Resources Officer. Mm-hmm. Now it's a CPO, so Chief People Officer.
Yeah.
So the whole language has just started to move in that direction of people.
Okay. Really interesting. And I hadn't necessarily thought about or reflected on that change. But I think taking it back, and for the benefit of our listeners, it'd be great to know how it is at the start and how you've got to where you are today in terms of day to day.
It was a hustle. The start was a hustle. I was I guess stripping it back I didn't fall into recruitment straight away. When bit of context, I am when I was like 18, 17, trying to earn some money for the holidays, etc. I used to do promotion work. So promotional work, which was at the time like really well paid. I was getting paid like 100, 120, 150 pounds a day, which
still good.
Yeah, that's really good money.
When I was 16, 17, I was like, this is great. I'll travel all across the country.
Yeah.
I've got a friend into it. I didn't join.
What were you promoting? Were you like a Red Bull boy? Yeah,
basically. I did like a Skoda. I was representing Skoda, and I couldn't drive at this point, but I was at a car show representing Skoda. Like, the irony. But that was in Norwich, so like all the way in Norfolk, which from Birmingham was a it's not an easy place to get to. But I dragged a friend out. We were both doing it. We went all over the shop. Then there was a company, it was N2O, and they were the company, they're like the promotional company, so they would act on behalf of brands. Anyway, I was doing that, earning good money, and then at the time, and then I was going to go to university to study journalism up in Liverpool. Always enjoyed writing. I went up for the induction day, and I looked around, and everyone was saying, "How do you get into it? And what's the path after that? You do an internship in London."
Yeah.
So I'm like, an internship, paid? No, probably won't get paid. You have to go and get a second job. I was like, hey,
how do you do that?
Bank of mum and dad.
Bank of mum and dad.
Yeah. I knew that wasn't going to be my parents are both super hardworking. But my mom's been working Wolverhampton Council for pretty much all her life. My dad's a mechanic. In fact, he calls himself an automotive technician. It's
it's the evolution of professions, right? We just talked about that.
Yeah.
So you gotta,
he likes bigging it up. But so I knew that I wouldn't even that would be a long stretch. So I looked at a job, and there was a job. It was paying £14,000. And I had no idea about tax, money, or anything like the cost of living in the south. I moved to Windsor. I was 19, moved down to Windsor, lived in a room which wasn't the room was. This place here was bigger than the room that I lived in. It was probably about this table, and it had a single bed and a
wow.
Moved in after £14,000 a year after tax. It wasn't a lot. So I was there for 6 weeks. It was funny actually. I was going through my old emails last week. I looked at it.
What did you move down to do? Was it a recruitment role?
No, this was an operations thing. So it was at the promotional company. It was basically booking in people. So what used to happen was, you'd see an email, you'd get a list of all the jobs, you'd phone up ASAP, say, hey, put me on this, that, and the other, and you'd get the work.
Okay.
So I was on the other side of the phone.
Yeah.
Getting, basically booking, calling people like, hey, you free on X, Y, and Z date? This is the booking, this is the pay, yes or no? Yes, booking, done.
Okay.
And just out of interest, so you mentioned briefly the move from Wolverhampton to Windsor. Was moving to London moving down south something you were interested in doing, or was it just that the opportunity arose and you fell into it?
Just that the opportunity arose. I think at that age I had no real idea, what London, no idea about London as a place, what the opportunity was there. I was pretty naive in that case. I just thought there's a job down there and I'll just go, thought nothing of it.
What was your mindset at the time, and what was the key driver behind you making the decision to leave Wolverhampton and come down south?
Well, so I went to boarding school as well. I think that probably played a factor in here. So I went to it's really interesting, a state boarding school. There's not many of them around.
Like James.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. One of our previous guests, James, who you know very well as well. Yeah. He went to a similar school. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Like buses, right? It's not a case of having detachment, but I've always been very independent. So to me, it was a no-brainer.
Where was the school?
In Stourbridge, which was Birmingham, way.
Okay. Midlands,
Black Country, all around there. So I still boarded, but there was a lot of people from London. The school itself, it's classed as a hospital school. So the whole point of the school was giving people from disadvantaged locations and areas opportunity for a really good education. So there was a really such an array of people there. You had people from all walks of life, literally all walks of life, together school, and that was, I didn't realise at the time, but for sure that shaped me massively. I think later on we might talk about socialising and being comfortable in different situations, etc.
Absolutely. And before we do, I just think for the benefit of our listeners and for us, my understanding of recruitment is very sociable. You're cold calling probably from the start, and you're trying to spot opportunities and connect people, but you're dealing with companies and the individuals that might want to join them. What does that actually look like day to day when you're starting out, and what skills do you think are well suited for that, and are they things you develop, or would you say people who have particular personalities fare better in the industry?
I've always said my recruitment's quite straightforward. It's about you as a person. To me, I would always hire the person over their ability, always. And I think more and more people are starting to have that perception now. So for me, if you have the right attitude, you can get to a good space in most professions if you've just got the right attitude, and that curiosity is what I always put it as.
And if someone is looking to go into recruitment, what would be the key skills for them? Would you say a similar sort of attitude, focused personality, or I'd imagine you need to have quite good communication skills, networking skills,
thick
things
skin.
like that. Thick skin.
Yeah, I think again it's moved away from like a lot of what you said there, like classical sales traits, right? So
yeah.
I actually think it's moving away from that. Like nowadays, if you're quite like big and brash, and like we used to call like recruiters like the poor man's bankers, right? It's like people like you live that lifestyle, and you saw like fast paced, work hard, play hard, etc.
Right.
Nowadays, like there's such a focus on like well-being and the people person. I think to be a good recruiter now, you don't have to be like extroverted. You can actually be like relatively. In fact, I know loads of great people in my org who are relatively introverted, really good at what they do, because you bring different skills to the table. You could be highly analytical.
Yeah.
You could be really ingrained in the data and the numbers, etc. Which again, like there's a big aspect of that now as well.
But presumably, and I, from knowing you like, outside of this, get a sense of real high degrees of emotional intelligence. And I don't know if that's a prerequisite or something that's developed, but I'm sure that helps, as well as an interest in people. Is that correct?
100%. For me, like whenever I'm interviewing anyone, I think between whenever I try and speak to people, I think the difference between a good recruiter and a great recruiter is that emotional intelligence, and it's really hard to coach that. It's just about people like taking a step back and being able to read the room and read how to react and act in certain situations. That's it's really hard to quantify. But if when someone's got it, like when and when someone does have it, I wrap them up in cotton wool and make sure that you hold on, because it's quite a really rare trait to get.
Yeah.
So just moving on, I know you mentioned you work at Checkout now.
Yeah.
Your recruitment roles presumably changed over your career. Can you just quickly give us an overview as to how that's developed and how you went from starting out in the industry to where you are now?
Yeah, like whistle-stop tour, if you like. I joined a company called Austin Fraser in Reading, like again, just on the back of that end-to-end piece, just joined there 6 weeks later.
And is that a recruitment?
That's a recruitment like agency.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a recruitment agency. That was my first foray into recruitment. I was there for about four and a half years, and I loved it.
And how did you get that job?
Just literally applying.
Okay.
I had no qualifications. I had door-to-door sales experience and some promotion experience. I had very little, but I just applied to everything.
Yeah.
And actually, I had a rec to rec who was a recruiter, which is basically a recruiter for recruiters.
Yeah.
And looking back, she got me that job. Like so grateful for that. She helped me. She prepped me. I went to about 8 interviews, and I got 2 offers. I got 6 rejections.
Okay.
Like again, old school places. Went in, people, braces, suits.
Really?
Yeah. And I just sat on a big round table like this. It was a group interview, and I was just well out of my depth. I thought, I'm not cut out for this.
But valuable experience, right? In hindsight,
it is. And if you kind of again, old school recruiters, I knew like I'm not going to be like that, and I was really fortunate. Austin Fraser, they definitely shaped me. But yeah, I guess the quick journey, if you like, was Austin Fraser. Worked my way up there. Again, being young, single in Reading, I had very little ties, so I used to work very hard.
Yeah.
And that was my kind of mantra was there. I'll just work harder than anyone else.
And for people who are maybe considering a career in recruitment, you mentioned there that you worked your way up at this particular agency. Could you maybe expand a little bit more on sort of, the kind of metrics that you might be expected to achieve, or how someone might have to go about, climbing the professional ladder within an agency, because I'd imagine it's quite different in agency or in-house recruitment, that kind of thing. But if we start with the agency, how would someone go about progressing their career?
They're getting closer and closer now. Agencies are good agencies and internal. But again, I'll talk about it how it is now, not back then. Because back then was again a bit more classical sales. Yeah. Right now, I think your relationship building is really important. Like how you can interact with clients, how you can win business. Because winning business is no longer just being the biggest person in the room. It's it's how you, again, the emotional intelligence, or how can you build relationships that are long lasting and build trust early. So I think if you really learn the industry that you're recruiting in, that will give you a massive head start. If you've got an opportunity and you're working, again, what will happen is if you were to work at a respectable agency, you're working at a particular vertical. So the view is then you become specialised in that vertical, and you will be able to really get under the skin of that market and then have access to a talent pool, which your companies won't have.
Can you just give us some examples of the various verticals that you might be involved in?
So I worked in software engineering, so tech. Again, I was very fortunate to land in that place, like in retrospect, because how the industry has gone, right? So I worked in software engineering, and again, breaking that down even further was .NET development, so a specific language of coding, C#.NET. And then I worked a particular market, which is a geographical market, which was Thames Valley. So for me specifically, I would just go and contact software companies within basically from Slough to Oxford, and just again look to try and build relationships. You try and engage with candidates. You get involved in the local area, meetups, etc. You try and really get under. You have to invest a lot of time.
So that's really interesting. So it's not just you kind of sit at your desk and look at either CVs or try to find candidates on LinkedIn. It sounds like you have to also build your own client base. So not just the talent pool that's applying for jobs, you also have to build a client base of organizations that are looking for talent. So it's kind of like an acquisition role as well, where you're getting in business.
And that's the sales part, right? So it's like, it's full. Some companies break it down into like just recruiters and sourcers, so people who just go and work on the candidate side of things, and people who are more client facing. So certain companies will slice and dice different things. I was a 360 recruiter, which meant I was like full cycle, full desk. Basically find the candidates, find the clients, put them both together, charge a fee, on to the next person.
Okay.
And just getting back to your career, so you started at the agency. What then followed that?
So I met my now wife at that agency.
Big up, Lottie.
Yep. So we met there. So I was going to open up an office in Austin, Texas, with that company. Met Lottie, and it basically boiled down to I either go out there and she can't, or I don't go out there and we stay together. So it was a shame that it all got to that space, but in the end, we'd only known each other for a few months. But again, when you know, right? So
and you're married now.
We're married now,
so it worked out.
So exactly, it was. I think they well, I still talk to the directors, etc., and people there, and I think it's they get it now. I wasn't messing about. And we basically, when all that happened, we basically came to again, there was a lot of stuff behind the scenes with that company. Like, I handed over my desk and I was ready to move. So it was a very last minute, turn. And in the end, we thought, we can't work here anymore. I don't really want to work at another agency. So we just set it by ourselves.
How old were you?
21.
And she's similar age to you?
So she was 20 at the time.
She was 20 at the time.
Yeah.
And you were both at the same agency.
Yep.
And you thought, right, U-turn, handbrake, quick drift, and then you thought, right, let's just do it ourselves.
Yeah.
And that's incredible.
Yeah, we just went for it.
How did you set up? How did you go about it?
Company's house. So you set up a company on company's house. Cost about £5. And that's the start. So that's when if you look on like certificates of corporation and whatnot, it's your name, etc. Yeah. And then so we started that. Again, we understand the basics of like.
It's about £13 now, by the way. Inflation is mad.
10 years.
Either we're that old or
10 years, things change. So we did that. Just set it up. We knew like the basics of like what you need to start building a recruitment agency, but at the time we just thought nothing of it. Like we were just we kind of like I felt confident. I was good at what I did. Again, like record, all that kind of stuff. I had confidence in my ability. I knew that Lottie was great. She was only like a year in, I think, or something like that. So she was fairly junior, but like, hey, like let's just she can learn. I'll learn from her. Like we just make it work. And we did it. We just set up. So we were renting a place at the time together. We moved in all pretty quick. Like it was all just very awesome. We have overhead. Like, okay, hang on, we've just started a business. We've still got overheads, etc. And
yeah.
Most people think buying a house together is a big commitment.
Yeah, honestly, for us, when we bought a house, everyone who's like, I was like, this is no further step than what we've already done.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. So you set up the business, and you went on your journey of this entrepreneurial journey. Yeah. How did you go about actually acquiring clients? Because there must have been a period of time where you had to go out and scout for clients and also look for applicants as well. and really put your skills to work.
Yeah, we just went right back to basics. Like we were fortunate that when I went out of the non-compete, there were a few clients who came back to work with us, which made life a lot easier. The biggest client that we worked with actually then went to go and work for Internet. So again, that's the continuation. We just went back to basics. What we used to what we call CV stripping. So, like so and so's worked. Software developer, where they previously worked. Okay, so they're companies that we know hire software developers, so we start contacting them, etc.
You have to think outside the box. Yeah,
it's very logical. If you break, and that's what I said, recruitment. If you break it down and don't get too in the weeds, it's actually quite a straightforward job. You just need to compartmentalize different actions, etc.
Yeah.
No, it's super interesting, and I've not set up my own business. I know you have, but can you talk us through some of the highs and lows of running your own thing, especially at such a young age? And did you have much guidance, or was it kind of trial and error at the time?
We just figured stuff out. I guess the highs and every month was a high and a low. When you've got outgoings and bills, and you've got like nothing in your account, and you've got one client paid us by a check. We're like, we need to cash this check real quick. We've got, funds coming out. So it was hand to mouth most months. And then every now and again you'd have like a massive month, and you just think, you're on top of the way. It was just the heart, it was a true roller coaster. We'd live like kings sometimes and think, great. Other times we're thinking, we should have gone on that holiday.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's almost like being, in Wolf of Wall Street or something. You're kind of trading day to day, but it comes along with being a business owner. I think particularly when you're starting out and developing your client base and things like that.
It was a lifestyle for us as well. I think that's a word, like it's a good point to make. For us at the start, it was a lifestyle. We had no intention of growing it. We were just like, we can earn a really good amount and be very comfortable just by doing it.
Okay, so that's something I guess for people to consider, that obviously in summary, you can harness some sort of sales type skills if that's your background, communication, network building, resilience, and then you can work for an agency and work on either on the 360 basis, where you're acquiring clients and you're working with applicants, or purely on the applicant side, and then you can also start out on your own and develop a profitable business that will afford you a certain lifestyle, which is fantastic. And just touching on the point of emotional intelligence, I think starting a business with your partner, future wife, your future wife at the time, and having those like highs and lows, having expenses, and I'm sure there were months where you're like, oh my God, how are we going to pay for stuff?
Same day money coming in and going straight out.
Yeah, you're balancing a business and your relationship in both hands, and
the tender age of 21.
At 21, I think that's incredible, and hats off to you both for managing that and having a successful relationship and a successful business out of it as well. So moving on to sort of potentially internal type recruiting, did you ever do that for an organization?
Yeah, so my when we had the business, there was our biggest client was a company called Solera. They were like a SaaS technology company in the auto industry.
Not the ice cream.
No, Solera. It's actually my dad, again, who's a mechanic. He actually uses Solera software. It's like one of those companies no one knows of, but they're big.
SaaS is software
as a service. Okay. Yeah, software as a service. So basically a technology company. Our biggest client, and then one day, my main point of contact there at the time, one of the HR directors, said, "We're looking to hire an internal recruiter." And I went, I thought, hang on, if they get this right and they hire a good internal recruiter, then that's our biggest client. God, and at this point, they're probably about 80% of our revenue. They were just, everything we were doing was...
Are they quite a big organisation?
Yeah, huge, about 6,000 people. And billions.
Was this before, when they were acquired, or before they were acquired?
So they were. This was when they went public and they went private again after. Okay. But I think about valuation wise, it's probably about $5-6 billion or something. But yeah, and so we just sat down, and I actually was recruiting for that role for them.
And you thought,
I'm making my own bed here.
Yeah, exactly. You're always digging
my own grave. Yeah.
If
I get this right, then I'm in trouble.
I might as well dig it and jump in.
And to be fair, like finding recruiters is very hard. It's an industry now. Like it's such a high demand for recruiters, good recruiters, and companies will pay really good money now for good recruiters.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm hiring in my team now, and we can't hire fast enough. But yeah, at the time, we had that, and in the end, he turned around and said, "Hey, do you fancy it?" This was actually I was co-interviewing the recruiter for him, just so I could interview from a technical perspective. He just turned around at the end and said, "Would you want to join us?" I was like, "Well."
Did he make you an offer you couldn't refuse?
Yes, yeah, basically it was. I won't go into the ins and outs of it, but it was at the time I was like, "Hey, I'm recruiting for this role. Like, you won't be able to afford it." So he actually came up with a very smart. It wasn't like, again, it was just more leveraged around like a variable amount. I was like, "Well, this." I said, I got in the car and I phoned Lottie. I was like, "Just offer me this role," and they've offered me X, Y, Z. It's like. That's crazy.
I hope they paid you your commission for finding you as well.
Yeah, I put the fee through, and and Lottie was like, "They haven't offered you that." I was like, "I can't believe it. It doesn't make any sense because it's basically like a variable pay, paid on like the number of hires that I make." But I had so much influence. But when you're working internally, you have so much influence on that. I was like, "This can't." But they did. And I was like, "Okay, like, yeah, we need to make this work." So then I went into that. Lottie continued with the business. And she continued again, and when you're doing it by yourself, I think things were like super hard. The dynamics all changed, and then like she was offered a job at AWS, Amazon, so she works there now. She's doing fantastically well. And I then moved to Solera full time, and that was when I think like my career really, that was like I was really fortunate then. I got exposed to so many different things. Started off as an IC, just an individual contributor. That's what an IC is. Looking after the UK hiring. That then within 3 months became Germany, the Netherlands, etc.
So that's your role expanded into those
so my
areas.
role, because the company is a global company with offices all over the space.
Yeah.
And then I just had to go over there.
Before we go on, because we know how hardworking you are, and I'm not sure that's come across here. Like, it's not like, you just kind of set up your own company, you make all these connections, you get amazing offers. Like, can you give us an insight into the hours you're putting and the realities? Because I think people might watch you and think, oh yeah, like he's a really chilled guy, but I know you take your work very seriously, and it's not a coincidence that after 3 months your remit was expanded and thereafter. So can you just, what would an average week look like for Charlie? And just bring that to life a bit.
And sorry, before you do that, can we maybe, because we've kind of looked at 3 particular areas that you can do recruitment in.
Yeah.
Maybe if you can kind of break down for an agency, for your business, I'd imagine that was particularly intensive.
And they were all unique ways of working.
And the sort of internal, it would be good to get a kind of a balance between the lot of them.
I think on reflection, agency was actually when I probably worked my least hardest. Like it was, those days it was, you didn't have a laptop, you couldn't take it home, so you had to go into the office to actually work. So I'd be in at the office about 7:30, 7ish, and I'd leave about 7:30.
Were they your contracted hours or?
No, 9 till 5:30 were the contracted hours.
Yeah.
But again, it was just when I was recruiting agency, it was literally like the early bird, like, because you'd have your ad response and you post your job adverts. So the weekend people would apply, and they'd apply to multiple different job adverts with different companies, etc.
Yeah.
Like again, you want to be the first on the phone to that person because you're probably working potentially the same job as your competitors.
And just to flag there then, that remember, when you're applying for jobs, it's not just that, you think, right, I've applied to this one company or several companies and I hope they pick me. You have to remember there's also recruiters on the other end that are looking and thinking, right, this person may have applied to several places and they may get an offer from somewhere else.
Yep.
And we want to try and snap them up. Or get them in for an interview and have a conversation. So I just wanted to bring that to light to give people a sense of, that kind of expression people use where it's not just you or them picking you, it's you also picking them and trying to kind of,
So agency, your least hardworking, that was your 7 o'clock to 7 o'clock?
Yeah.
What did the others look like? Your own business and then working in house?
The own business is a weird one because it's you just don't stop. Like you cannot
drop the ball.
There's no that you don't have any resemblance of work and play. It was just you're just
lifestyle.
You just lifestyle. We were lying like in bed on our laptops working. We'd be on the beach, we'd be taking phone calls. It was just a constant, constant thing. And so that's hard to kind of quantify, like the hours. It was just that was just constant. Even when we tried to go away to a break, we couldn't really switch off again, because when you've got a business and you're only that big, you're a single point of failure. So like there's no you can't just go off out of office. Hey, can you look after this for me?
Yeah, because you're essentially like one entity.
You're
right?
like a sole trader.
Travel together and live together, and so it's when you're traveling, you're together.
Exactly.
Yeah. And am I right in thinking that when you had that business, you recruited people?
Yes, we did grow the business slightly. We did grow it slightly. I think we ended up with about four or five people.
Because that must have come with its own, like, not stress, but like people management.
Learnings, absolutely. People management, I'd have done it completely different now to how we were then. But, it shapes you, all these different experiences, they shape you and make you a lot different. Not better mate necessarily, but definitely we'd have done it differently for sure. But at the time we were thinking we had too many jobs to recruit for, so we were just like, well, hey, let's do it, let's expand. And then we expanded, and we were like, oh, I don't really like this. We started looking at it, people actually costing us money, and we were like, have we hired the right people? And it just becomes a bit of a drain. In the end, we were just like, you know what, strip it back. Those conversations weren't easy. But again, so we're like 22, 23, having to
lay people off
who are like
good prep for the future, though.
30s.
Yeah, and I think this really shines a light on when people are thinking about starting businesses and going down that avenue. And I think it's quite easy to fall into the trap of, right, well, I'll start a business, then I will start to scale it. If it gets to a point of being successful enough, I'll start to scale it and hire people, and talent's really important. I'm going to hire really talented people. But you have to manage those people.
Yeah.
And you have to empower them and give them encouragement and confidence to be able to make decisions. And, ultimately what they do affects your bottom line as well. And so it's really important for people to understand that if you do build a business, or if you begin a business, that once you start hiring people, you don't just take a step back and let other people oil the machine, so to speak.
And on that, I think it's important to draw the point out that it's an entirely different skill set, right? Placing people to managing people.
100%.
And it's almost like you didn't necessarily get to learn that organically. It was just, oh no, now you're a manager. And I'm sure that stood you in really good stead going forwards. But at the time, it's maybe, not necessarily realising, hang on, I'm broadening my job scope significantly here when I actually thought I'd be reducing my time.
Yeah, I mean, now, like I say, my role now is just all leading, all management, so I don't do any recruiting now. Completely different. It was that time I think was really interesting, and having those conversations were really. I think looking back now, shaped both of us, myself and Lottie, and how we went about those. And again, we quite literally, we always, when we make decisions, we move super fast. We trust our instincts, and we always have. And we literally were lying in bed one night and we were saying, hey, actually, you know what? I don't think this is. I don't enjoy this as much now. I preferred it when it was just us two. Next day, we went in, spoke to everyone, and that was the end of it.
How many people did you get up to?
5.
5 including you, or
five?
It was
7.
5
employees. Yeah.
5 employees.
Yeah.
And you just.
Yeah.
Wow. Sorry, back to work ethic, because I feel like we have to draw this out whilst we have Charlie on here.
Yeah.
So your last role before where you are now, what did that look like day to day?
That was the hardest one. So obviously my role evolved. Like I said, and again that's when it started to get busy. When I started to look after Germany, I think initially there was a project, and I was there basically Sunday night or Thursday night every week for about 4 months or something like that. So I was traveling to Berlin, and when I travel for work, you've got nothing to do other than work. So you're just like constantly in this state of work. So that was, again, as its own challenges. Again, working hours were still, they were like relatively similar to what I was doing before. But then as I was being successful and winning over, I guess, internal stakeholders as well, earning that trust, what I talked about before, my remit then expanded to looking after. We basically had an initiative with the business, moving all of our tech, all our engineers into 2 centres of excellence, one in Seville, one in Mexico City. And so my task was to kind of design a process, hire a team. We hired eight people in Seville, 8 people in Mexico City, to build out these COEs, which required us to hire about 700 technical people in the space of about 9 months. So at that velocity, and that was the start of COVID, that was probably one of the most exciting things I had to do. So building that, hiring the team, developing the team, and all of a sudden, overnight, I had 16 reports, both in Spain, 1 hour, I think maybe 1 or 2 hours ahead now, and then Mexico, which is 6 hours behind. And that's when my day
crossing the time zone,
and that really
cross-continentally is,
that's when it exploded. That was when my mornings were 8 a.m. starting with the morning sync with Spain, then meetings throughout the day, and then about 3 p.m. 3 p.m. kicks off with thingy, and that would be until about 11, 12 o'clock at night.
And just on that, because I think we had a kind of meeting today with someone who's quite senior at our office, and they have 4 children, and they were like, oh yeah, you just don't sleep. Like if there was a book, the individual said they would call it What Happens in the Dark, in that whenever the work's getting done, it's normally not light outside. Yeah. And I think she actually said, I don't want to kind of almost make like that sound like it's something to be super noble about, in that we often hear, oh yeah, if you're a lawyer, you have to pull these hours, and people think, yeah, I can do that. Like, I think it's important to also go through the realities of what that looks like. I know I've been there. I now continue to work hard, but no harder than I absolutely need to, because I think you have to kind of set up a sustainable model if you want to have a long and successful career.
Sustainable is the key there, for sure.
So do you mind just like going through like how that was week to week? Because I remember seeing you on occasions on the weekend, and you were like, I'm exhausted, but I'm just so happy to not be working.
It was, I mean, again, it links to my personality type as well. I've got a very addictive, really addictive personality type. And so for me, when I was in that, ingrained in that, to me it was, I was just in, and I was like, my personality is, everything just gets dialed up, because I knew what I was doing, and I was able to operate, and it was just like I'd wake up and just straight, I'm at it, whatever o'clock in the morning or at night. But yeah, it was just a constant, and Lottie she would say, I would literally, that was when we had our house in Binfield, I would literally, upstairs, we converted our second bedroom into an office, and I would literally like roll out of bed in the morning into the office, have a shower, go into the office, and I would stay there, and literally Lottie would come up and, basically feed me, because she knew I would not go down and feed myself, because I would just be, back to back, I'd always have something to do. And again, maybe once or twice, fine, isolated, we were talking, months, and all of a sudden it was like, I think 4 or 5 months in after doing it. And no one actually really, not many people commented to me directly, but certainly people commented to Lottie, were just like, he's just not very present. And I wasn't at all. It was like my mind was constantly, again, I'd have my phone, I'd be at dinner, my phone would be there, I'd get a phone call from the States or whatever, and I'd answer it. I'd get a message. Like, again, you're just always on. And when you have, again, the personality type that I've got, you struggle. You struggle to be able to just say no, and to be able to compartmentalize. And I tried at times. I said, hey, everyone, I'm going to have an hour here for lunch. Please don't put meetings in here. I think it lasted about a week. And then I was there again. And Lottie was like, I always say to her, hey, I'm going to, maybe we can go for a walk here, or do this or do that. And she knows. I would just, say it, and it'd be like that for a bit. And then all of a sudden, meeting, and it's gone.
Work creep.
That what he said, having a sustainable, it wasn't sustainable. I knew that eventually I'd burn out, to the point whereby you get yourself in a repetitive pattern. And I guess you look back and you think, what was I being the best version of myself to the business and my team and my wife and my friends? Probably not. I was just in like I think I'd always say I was probably like working at about 75-80%. I was never quite as sharp or as on it as you would be if you were being a bit more.
Well, this is the thing as well. I mean, rest is incredibly important for recuperation,
100%,
and the recharge. And so you can put in all of those hours and like at an intense level, but if you're not resting or eating properly and exercising, you're actually not as productive. So there'll be a portion of those hours that you're putting in either in the morning or in the evening, when you're kind of up and down in terms of your rhythm, that actually are wasted because you're not at your sort of most productive.
Yeah.
So just to make that clear, that it's important that you rest, eat, exercise.
I say the same thing at my
things.
current place now to people. You know, when we're working, we're working.
Yeah.
When we're not.
Do you find that now?
Sorry, before we move on, I
really
really want to reiterate the point that Nikki just made, because I think we live in a kind of environment or social media where people are like, and I love it. Like, I was listening to David Goggins on the way here, and it's like, you've always got to be on. Like, I mentioned these guys, like, callous your mind, but like, the reality is sustainability is actually probably more important if you're doing,
and longevity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'd say Charlie sat across the table, extremely successful in his own right, extremely hardworking, probably one of the most hardworking people I know. But even he's saying you need to value rest, because you will get diminished returns and not operate at your optimum capacity, and it won't be overall sustainable. So just I wanted to
and I think sorry, Charlie, just very quickly. I think particularly in the industry in the legal industry, right? We've seen people like go ham, go in from the age of 21 through their studies, then into training contract, then climbing that ladder, and by the time they're like 45, 50, they burn out because of the intense hours and a lot of stress and pressure and stuff. So it's important to be able to take that downtime as well.
Don't know if you wanted to add anything on that.
Anything to that?
It's in the people that often you see who like will like brag about working. Like, I think back to an old CEO who would openly say to people, like, he gets 2 hours sleep. And he would openly say to people that's what he expects. I kid you not.
Old school dude.
Yeah, old school. It's he's like, again, he's a prominent CEO. Right?
Yeah.
I was there when he was saying, it's like, hey, I get 2 hours sleep a day. If you want to be successful, that's what you got to do. I kind of like, you'll see people who would do that. I think the caveat, when you listen, you might hear like stories about really high level execs at massive companies. Often when you're working that long, all you're doing is dictating, and you're just telling people to do stuff. So I think it's very different when you're an IC, or not an IC, when you're hands on doing the work itself. Like you need to rest and recuperate. Often like the glory stories, I'd say in inverted commas, is largely, I think, people who are at the very top of the tree, who will work those sorts of hours consistently, but they won't be doing any data mining or pulling spreadsheets or data. They'll be telling people to go and do that and saying, hey, I want you to do this deadline by X, Y, and Z, like driving. And it's I think it's an important like caveat to have, because you can get drawn into that kind of, again, glitz and glam when it's not actually the case.
This might be a really poor analogy, but if you think about it like a ship, if the captain's just steering the wheel, compared to the people who are maybe doing the rowing.
The
rowers need a break, but the captain may be able to steer.
I think that's the perfect analogy.
Those people in the engine room that are like sweating, grafting, covered in oil, they definitely need more sleep than maybe somebody who's doing
100%.
less.
Especially if they want to be a captain one day.
And this is it. And everyone's got you've got to graft, you've got to work your way up, and that's how you appreciate it. But the idea that everyone needs to work like 20-hour days, 20 whatever, it's just antiquated. You don't need to do that.
And I think that's kind of what the message that we want to get across with this podcast is, although we say, hard work beats talent, it's not to say that you have to work yourself bloody to the core and every hour God sends. There is that element of smart work and making sure that what you're doing, it has that compounding effect of, growth throughout your career and personal life. And do you find you're better at balancing that now, Charlie?
Yeah, it goes back to being like the best version of yourself, I think. Today, I had someone in my team I could sense that she was starting to get, like, feel overwhelmed. The questions were coming in, she was asking me more, and she was very apologetic, and I could say, hey, like, I could sense that she was just like, just take a step back, don't stress about it. She said, okay, I need to do it. I was like, do it. She finished work at like 3 o'clock. I was like, just take the afternoon, just relax. It happens every few weeks. And I know that she'll come back tomorrow and be like, thank you, I needed that just to walk, refresh, and she'll be a better person tomorrow than if I'd let her just work herself up in this little frenzy today. And I think that's when it goes again. Like, when you've got good people around you, I guess, can identify that when people are like that. Again, I'd much rather her be a best version of herself tomorrow rather than just her work an extra 2 hours today and get herself in a bit of a space.
Just while we're still on career, because I know we want to background.
I've got one more question as well, actually. Do
you adopt the same, because we haven't really spoken to any managers, as such.
Correct.
And it just, I know you manage, and I think by the sounds of it, you manage very well. Do you adopt the same approach? Because we had a conversation about different personality tests that you and your team have taken, but like that was an approach you might adopt for that individual. Do you are you quite nuanced in how you approach it?
100%. Whenever I get asked, one of the most regular questions I get asked from people if they're interviewing for a role that's going directly into me, what's your leadership style? And that's like a common, like it's the most obvious question to ask, I think. And I don't really have a style. I don't really have a style. I think if you say, because then it's assuming that you're kind of, it's like, you either fit or you don't. Like this is what I'm doing. It's my way or the highway kind of thing. And I think that's just such a poor way of leading.
Malleable.
Yeah. And this is, I don't know, I've got two people that report into me, and they're both so different. One person openly says, one of the first things I did when I joined Checkout was, again, it's a hard position to go into when you're a manager and you're being like parachuted into a team, and they're all, like, who's this person? What's it going to be like? Is it going to be, and I've, you had to go straight. And I said this, one person said, hey, I like being micromanaged. I really like lots of attention, lots of comments about that. And I just, cool. And the person, like, keep me at arm's length. Yeah. Again, fine. I know that she definitely doesn't need to be kept at arm's length because, again, you don't know what you don't know. But again, you can do so in a way where you're being mindful of the way. And the other person, again, when I'm getting loads of questions, I wouldn't see it as like, again, you just have to adapt. You can still lead. And I think, again, that's when the EQ comes in. You just got to be, I think, mindful of the way in which people want to be talked to and want to be led, how they want to be led as well. Because then ultimately, if you're being mindful of that, then you'll get a lot more out of them rather than just saying, hey, this is how I work. You need to get in line. And that's when nowadays, especially with how crazy the market is, as I was saying with recruitment, people can go and get a job. They could get 5-10 offers next week if they wanted to.
Well, particularly within the technology industry, I think now
technology recruiters now, if you wanted to get a job, you could get a job within a day.
On with really great comps as well.
Really good comp.
And so I completely agree with you, and just mirror what you said there. To be a really skilled leader and manager, being able to be adaptable and actually understand people is incredibly important, because those days of kind of ruling with an iron fist, I think maybe a slightly more old school style of management, but I think people probably appreciate far more when you truly get to know them a bit better and their personality style. So I just wanted to ask you, Charlie, can you draw a bit of a parallel, right, for us? Because you've clearly had a really successful career to date. You're doing great. So I don't want to kind of beat around the bush and say that everyone will make it there. I think everyone has an opportunity to get there. But for people who are, just want to get into recruitment, maybe not necessarily intending to get to management level or, the kind of senior leadership type of position, could you draw the parallel kind of how someone's career might be mapped out?
Yeah. You'd go in, I think if I was someone now, I would 100% recommend to go internal rather than agency whenever you get a chance, mainly because of the breadth of experiences and exposure you get. It's far broader than what you get at agency. Typically, Checkout's a good example. I think starting off, if you were to come in at the entry level, there's this. You would quite simply look to just build your understanding of the market. Again, start to build relationships with stakeholders internally. Ultimately, fill roles. You want to make hires, but then also you get project-based exposure. So. Then all of a sudden you get exposure into, maybe like developing people or, like, for example, there's a project that we're doing right now. It's basically revamping our like visa and relocation scheme. So, hey, we know rather than just hiring and just only be able to recruit from London or surrounding area, we can now start hiring from Spain, Portugal, wherever, And again, like those sort of projects, the conversations you have with different stakeholders, etc., gives you a lot of exposure. So then all of a sudden your knowledge and your understanding expands. So there's so many different paths you can go down now. I check out as an example, you've got people experience when we talk about, the experience that we give for people who are onboarding, people operations. The onboarding experience that we give new hires, operations, again, like visa questions, general operational pieces within.
So you kind of have opportunities for self-development development, professional development that can potentially put you in other spaces like operational type roles and stuff.
People in analytics, we've got people, we've got a coordinator, which is typically one of the entry level we have, which is more like coordination. So you just get exposure, you get visibility into the how. You don't necessarily do it, but you understand the how and the why. And there's one person who's doing great, and she wants to move into like more operational, like data, analytical piece. So now she's shadowing someone who's doing that, and that's part of her growth. And she will eventually, in about a year's time, roll off into that path. And she's gone from being literally a coordinator, not wanting to go down the recruitment route, and she's going to move into analytics and operations. That's
brilliant. I think it really gives an idea of how diverse you can become, because the reason I asked that question is because not everyone necessarily wants to be a leader as well. It's not just about whether they can get there or not. And I think being able to develop yourself and your skills, you can potentially find other passions. And so maybe if you're considering going into recruitment, but you think you maybe want to develop certain skills that aren't necessarily associated with recruitment itself, then maybe kind of going to a larger organisation where there's sort of various departments and things like that.
That exposure. And I think nowadays, especially, we've if you don't have to, if it's about like money or anything like with your drivers, we have individual contributors, ICs, who are on the same banding, the same level as managers, senior managers, etc. So we recently hired someone who was previously a leader at a tech company. I don't want to be a manager anymore. It's exhausting. It is. It's exhausting. You constantly think about your team and developing. I want to be an IC. We hired an IC, still on the same pay band. Again, there's so many opportunities for people now. You haven't got to be tied to or married to a specific role.
So that's been super interesting, and I've learned a lot about recruitment. But I think it'd be really helpful for the guests to get a bit of an insight into your background. You mentioned your mum was a counsellor, on Wolverhampton Council. Your dad's a automotive technician.
There we go. Yeah.
And you went to boarding school. Can you just give us a really quick overview of your upbringing and some of the key principles you learned, which you think you apply today?
I 100%. All the the relative success and everything that I've been lucky enough to have is I would proportion a lot of it to my parents. My dad's work ethic was, again, he weekends, just, and also I think the type of person as well. I think I get a lot of my personality from mixed from my parents in both ways. My mom can be quite direct, and again, I have there's an aspect whereby there'll be a certain point and I will end up being quite direct and I won't beat around the bush, etc. So I get that from my mom. My dad is just, everyone just loves my dad. Like, he's just one of that person who everyone just really likes, and he's always had a way of just being very, not harmless, but very approachable. And again, I try to, if I can, I try to emulate that kind of relationship that he's able to build. I brought up always playing sport. So I've always been really competitive, just always been super competitive all my life. They, like I said, I think the way in which, I've seen, again, relatively humble, but, always, I never went without. I was really lucky in that respect. I know they sacrificed a huge amount for me. And that's, I guess, when the older you get, I think the more you appreciate that. At the time, you don't really realise. So, for me, one of my big drivers has always been to provide, not just for my parents, but for my sister, for example. She's 10 years younger than me. Of course, Lottie, her family, etc. You get that kind of family, very tight knit. I think you end up just changing what your goals are and what your motivations are. For me, it's not necessarily earning loads of money for myself or any being successful for myself. It's make it for my parents comfortable.
Do you think that your upbringing played quite a upbringing and I guess socioeconomic background and where you grew up? Do you think that had quite a direct impact on your work ethic when you left?
Yeah. We spoke about this before, but I understand you didn't go to university, right? So also the impact that would have had as well.
Yeah, I think so. The device, absolutely, the diversity is a big thing. I feel relatively comfortable in most social situations. I look at people at very face value. I always try not to preconceived ideas of who someone might be based on whatever. because again, like I know, like what I'll say, I think you when Alex came up to watch Wolves play for one of my birthdays. You know, there was someone at the pub who literally head to toe in tattoos. You couldn't see, there was no skin. It was just tattoos. You know, you might look on the street and think, "Wow, scary person." But again, I met him, I knew him like first, and he was like again the nicest, most like gentle person you could imagine. So I've always been, again, that's been a really big factor for me. I think I've probably got a chip on my shoulder for sure about you know, we're talking about like privilege, and I think that's something that I'm definitely like working on is to you know, it's not that, again, that assumption that, you know, just because someone comes from a wealthy place doesn't necessarily mean that they're like lazy or entitled. I think, you know, I look at like Lottie, for example. She was like fortunate with her upbringing, but she is one of the hardest working people that I've known, and ironically, she would never take a penny from anyone. You know, so it's again, I've learned a lot, and I'm still learning. I think when it comes to, you know, diversity and people's backgrounds. Yeah.
I think we always are learning, aren't we? And I think we've all been pretty fortunate to have parents to kind of put those values in us, and you know, not judge people necessarily on certain biases or stereotypes. So that's really great. So you mentioned you went to the state school.
Yeah.
That was boarding school. Yeah. When you left there, did you already know you didn't want to go to university?
No, I thought I was going to go to university. I had no idea what I was going to do. Like, it was just very, you know, and all of a sudden I was like, hey, I'm actually quite good at writing. I've always been pretty good at writing. Always had a pretty dry, like style of humour and in general. So I went up to Liverpool a few times. And again, I don't know why. I just didn't think. I thought, actually, you know what? Like, why would I? Why? I'm going to be a journalist. Like, what's the? Am I that excited about? Do I want to do that for the rest of my life? Again, there's also very big decisions for people, you know, to make at the age of 18. Like, you know, and in some cases, you know, yourselves, you've got very like specialised areas. You know, the degree actually makes a big difference there. For me, I was like, I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm not going to be a lawyer. I don't really like whatever degree I get. I'm probably not going to go in. So I was like, really, is it going to be that valuable for me? And so then I thought. Went to work, ended in recruitment. I think that's when I really said to myself, you know, a lot of my friends were at university, and I thought, I've got to work super hard over the next 3 years. Because typically you go to university and you go there because you're going to have a higher velocity. Your career will escalate at a higher velocity than those who don't go to university typically. So I thought, I've got to work super hard over the next 3-4 years just to get myself much further ahead of people coming out and taking a graduate role. And that was part of the motivation for me, because I didn't want to be known or seen as that person, you know, who didn't go to university and then just ends up being in a very you know, monotonous like job. Again, that's just never been my personality type. I always like being stretched, and I think in that case, one of my biggest drivers was to make sure that, you know, I use these 4 years wisely and get as far ahead as I possibly can.
And by the sounds of it, you really did. So I think, just for the benefit of our listeners, a key takeaway there is not everyone has to go to university. A lot of our guests have done, but Charlie is sat here across the table having not done so, but had the perspective of, okay, well, if I'm not going, what do I then do in my time? By the sounds of it, you got relevant experience, set up a company, and went and worked at a client. In the same period of time, some people leave uni and go job hunting. So it's making the most of that time as well, depending upon what your kind of overall outcomes are. But I think there's definitely a lesson in there for those that don't go to university, that kind of success, whatever you might see it as, still is possible, but you've obviously got to put the hard work in and be quite targeted about what you do. Yeah. Mindful of time. Yeah, I think it's a good time to wrap up. One final question from me. We often ask our guests a few wrap up and takeaway questions, but I'd be interested in knowing if there are any kind of key books or podcasts that have had an influence on you and you would recommend to our listeners.
Yeah, I think Lead Eats Last is probably the go-to. I think that's Simon Sinek, I think it is.
So repeat that.
So Simon Sinek, Leader Eats Last. Okay. And it's more focused on why, the why about leading, being curious. I found it really insightful. Really insightful book about leadership in general. That's one thing I think you probably seem as a topic. It's really big for me. So I'd recommend anyone if they get a chance to read that as well.
Amazing. Well, Charlie, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank
It's been
you.
a great conversation. You're a talented recruiter, leader, and an all-round great guy as well. Alex, any closing words from you?
No, I've thoroughly enjoyed that. Learned a lot more about you, Charlie, a lot more about the industries you've worked in. And just thank you again for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks very much. Please guys, thank you for listening. Give us a like, comment, subscribe, and you can find us at Hard Work Beats Talent Podcast. And we look forward to speaking to our next guest on the next show. Catch you later. Thank you.